Greetings, Career Crazy by PC Pod or Pad. You are listening to and quite possibly watching the Paid to Play podcast. I am Rob Farker, your host for this show, and I want to help you monetize your madness by sharing the stories of folks who are earning income from the things they love doing, no matter how silly, geeky, or odd. Now, this episode is going to be an odd-numbered episode, and I say you might also be watching it because I am also recording it for a YouTube upload. It's kind of a state of the podcast episode, or maybe it would be more accurate to call it a state of play episode. I wanted to read this out. I have done a bit of scripting. I wanted to try doing bullet points for this, but instead it just kept coming out of my head. I heard myself saying it, and I wrote the full thing out rather than bullet pointing. So if you see my eyes sort of flick down to your left a little bit, that is because I'm referring to the notes I've made. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to make is an announcement to the structure of the show. My Patreon fans are already aware of this. I announced this back at the end of February to them. It is the end of March as I record this, and it will be going live on... when will it be going live? Let's see. April the 6th. Thursday, April the 6th. So it will still be going in that regular scheduled run. But what I wanted to announce was that I am changing the podcast's schedule from weekly to fortnightly. So last week's episode, when this one goes live, episode 113 with Mariah Avex, is the last of the weekly episodes. So that one is basically finishing as of the end of March. The next episode, episode 114 with Ryan Shapples, will be going up on the morning of Thursday, April the 13th, and episode 115 with Dean Rankin will be going up on the morning of Thursday, April the 27th. After that, my plan is to release 16 more episodes on that fortnightly schedule, with a break on July the 20th, until the end of Season 5 on Thursday, December the 21st. After that, I will be taking another few weeks break before I kick Season 6, 2018 off on January the 25th, which of course will be a Thursday Australian time, and run a 24-episode fortnightly season. As I said, I have made sure that I let my Patreon fans know about this ahead of time. But I did want to make sure, even though I've also updated the Patreon page itself and changed the welcome video, I did want to put an official in-stream notice up for the folks who are just listening along to let you know what is going on. So I'm sure the first question that's coming to mind is, why are you doing it, Rob? What's going on? I did write out a long explanation. The simple reason for the too long didn't read folks, because I am going to be waffling on a bit, is because I wanted more time to play. So, and you might be thinking, well, hang on a second, Rob, isn't this podcast a form of play for you? You know, isn't it fun to do? Well, yes, and in certain aspects, not quite. If you've been following on for a while, you will know that I do occasionally get the odd bout of cold feet when it comes to this podcast. Just go back to paidtoplay.com.au and do a search for episode 66. If you're a Star Wars fan, you'll know that's kind of aptly named, which came out during the 2014 season. While I do sometimes let my automatic negative thoughts get the best of me when it comes to my various initiatives, thank you again, Shelley Varela, my guest for the first episode for Season 5, 2017, which I think was 108. It's more that, what's the best way of putting this? I know I can do it in a good interview show. I can edit and I can publish competently. The show has built a small but loyal following, and the chats help inspire people. But for me, it's kind of like, to a certain extent, the novelty has worn off, and what is kind of left is satisfaction with the level of skill I've achieved. I kind of look at the next levels in challenge in doing this podcast in terms of marketing, social media, improving my recording processes and the like. And I find I'm not desperately curious about them. They don't feel like... You know what it's like? While people like to talk about logic and reason and that kind of thing, the ultimate thing that drives people, no matter what, is emotion. If you weren't passionate about something, if you didn't find the work compelling, if you didn't, like it at that base emotional level, if you weren't always excited about it, you don't really... It's not the natural next course for you. You're not interested in exploring the next levels of challenge further. Although, your logical brain might be telling you, all right, the next step is to improve what you're doing at the moment, get better, get more polished. If you don't care, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can polish all you like, but people can tell when your heart is not 100% in it. I don't know, maybe that's the reason why. I mean, guys, my apologies to you folks who've been following from day one, but, I've been doing this for 4 years, the show's had a small but loyal following, and, I don't know, it's got to that point where any further pushing I do feels more like a grind rather than just being propelled naturally by my own energy and interest. So yes, I've waffled on. I guess what I wrote down was, and this might make sense, they're not playful enough for me. There's not really that play in there anymore as such. So the question then, the next one would be, what does Rob want to put his time toward instead? You folks will know that I've been experimenting with various freelance avenues since I started the show. I've written process documents, I've written newspaper articles, blog posts, I've done voice work for commercials and people's private projects. I had the awesome experience of being able to host a pop culture convention in 2015 and get up on stage and be the manager for 2 question and answer panels, which is absolutely fantastic to do. I've chatted with folks like my guests, Kristen Baker and Stephanie Callahan and Scott Doucette, about what I want to be doing. And it's taken me about this long to hit a couple of realizations that, funnily enough, came during my daily commute in the car. The first one came after my chat with Stephanie Callahan. We had a separate chat, and if you ever want to try and get your head right, have a chat with Stephanie, especially if you're looking at what you really want to be doing and all that kind of thing. She's fantastic, folks. I can't recommend her highly enough. About freelance endeavors and all that kind of thing, and we kind of hit on how she noted how I seem to have the most energy about all the things that I've been talking about doing when I was talking about trying to make complex processes make sense, make them step by step, give people the information they need to do the next step in the process at that step, right when they need when they need it, and ideally not before and after. My apologies, my brain is getting ahead of me, and my mouth is trying frantically to keep up. So just take a couple of deep breaths, Rob. Slow down a little bit, you'll get the points out, even though we're already 8 minutes in. I was hoping this would be a short one, but I guess it might not be. Anyway, I started making some inquiries, started thinking about, the sorts of things, the ways I could make that into a business. Put myself out there a little bit to a few people. But yeah, again, it was one of those things that my heart wasn't 100% in. And one day while I was driving into work, I'd been kind of noodling it over, and I suddenly had this sensation that I was closing myself down somehow by just pursuing process management from a pure business standpoint. That I was playing too small, aiming too low, not bringing enough of myself to the table. But I had no idea what the opposite would look like. If I brought all myself to the table, what would that look like? What would I be doing? And this plays into another idea. Emily Wapnick, who hosts the group called the Putty Tribe, and you can find out more about her and the group at puttylike.com. I think it's .com, but anyway, if you do a search for Puttylike, you'll most likely find it. And she's had this idea for a good while that's tied into her whole thing about having kind of a renaissance career, about not being defined by one thing, about having multiple interests and multiple income streams that all sort of tie into this overall umbrella that is you. But it's not just you, as in your name, like me being Rob Farker. It has a bit more definition to it. It's Rob Farker something. And I don't know, Rob Farquhar, podcaster? Yeah, I suppose. Rob Farquhar, process documenter and organiser and assistant of business? Maybe. But again, that feels like it's kind of missing something. There's a chunk of me that's not there. And then one afternoon, when was it? I have a month ago, and this is because I copied and pasted this from a weblog post I put up late last year, so it wasn't a month ago. I just left work, I was driving home, and it hit me. Game Master. It's the one thing that I have been running away from for the better part of a decade. Heck, I've been kind of running away from it since I discovered it in a way. I've let my inner control freak kind of grab a hold and tried to make it about telling this story that I had in my head and not really knowing how to kind of embrace the freewheeling aspect of sitting down with a bunch of people and a lot of us participating in a tabletop role-playing game where I throw situations at my players and they, through their characters, come up with entertaining and at times hilarious ways of trying to tackle those situations. And even, especially when they don't succeed, it makes things even more interesting. It creates drama for the stories of the characters that they've created. So that is what I want to try and make a bit of space for, is to go all in on myself being a game master. And it's something that I know works because some of my most downloaded episodes, I mean, go back and listen to the episode I did where it was the 10 most downloaded episodes for 2016. And I think 3 of the 4 most downloaded were people who were in the RPG industry. And number 1 was a guy by the name of Adam Coble, who pretty much epitomizes this ideal of what I'm looking at. He is a full-time game master who works with an online channel called Roleplay. He is the paid game master in residence for a virtual tabletop web-based platform called Roll20. And like Shelley Varela said in her chat, you know, if he can do it, why can't I? Why not me? Thank you again, Shelley, for that wonderful little nugget. And yes, it is kind of scary, but I think it's that good kind of scary. It's that scary that tells me that I'm on the right track finally, and I need to be looking into this more. And if I do try and press on with pay-to-play on a weekly format, even if I do manage to outsource some of the stuff like I am looking at the moment, and if you want to help me with that, folks, please back the show on Patreon. You will see the target there, at which point I can start basically outsourcing most of the admin-related work, the stuff that doesn't relate to actually recording the chats and some of the social media marketing, to a good friend of mine, Scott Doucette, who runs a podcast of his own called Podcast Bay, which he's looking at revitalising for the coming year. But yes, right at the moment, if I do keep on with weekly, I am simply not going to have the time to really go all in on trying to be a game master and develop that aspect of myself and do the investigation necessary and, you know, have the time to run games, because in and of itself, being the game master for a tabletop RPG is a heap of work. So that's where it is at the moment. The pay-to-play podcast is not going anywhere. It's just easing off on the throttle a little bit before I wind up burning the engine out, because I don't have the interest in trying to maintain it as often as I would need to get the performance out of it that so far I've been expecting. Doing it on weekly has been a great confidence boost. It's been great to know that I can do it, but I want to do other things. So the podcast, I think, might well be part of those things, as I mentioned. 3 of the 4 most downloaded episodes last year were with people in the RPG industry or in the RPGs as entertainment for audiences realm, and I would like to try and speak with more of those folks just to do a little bit more homework on the kind of play that I want to do. So in the meantime, folks, watch this space. Please consider backing the show on Patreon, and as always, be a little dangerous and stop hiding yourself.